We're on. Hey, good afternoon or good morning, sports fans. PB and Z, we're coming at you. Today is almost the end of May, May 30th. Hey, PB, 1935. I know I wasn't around. I don't think you were around, right? Do you know anybody that was?
In 1935?
On this day?
Who was born this day?
Or just around? Because guess what? Because guess why? They would have saw Babe Ruth play his last baseball game today. I guess he didn't play the whole season if he ended up today, but this was the last day of Babe Ruth ever playing in 1935, May 30th. All right, that's the PB&C Sports Chaos Show. We're coming at you with a little history every single week. And we got our boy Tommy Brady's back. He has White Claw once again. Apparently, he's very much in love with this. This week he's drinking lemon. I'm having a harpoon. What do you got over there, PB?
Doing my Delray Beach Salt Brewery Screaming Rails IPA. Love it.
Nice. All right, hey, this week we're going to talk a little sports coming back to action. Apparently some of the leagues are starting to come to terms on what they're going to do. We'll talk about that. We've had NASCAR now for a few weeks. We've had some UFC action. But now we're going to get some of the big four. Well, maybe. The baseball babies still haven't figured it out yet, so we don't know about them. Plus, we're going to talk football once again. AFC North. PB's going to give you his game-by-game predictions. That should be fun to hear. All right, I got a little DYK for you. Just came out in the news this morning, PB. Forbes magazine named its richest athlete of the year last year, most money made. Any idea who that was?
Oh, my God. No, I really don't. I take too long.
Roger Federer. Highest paid athlete in all sports, $106 million. Meanwhile, you probably heard the news last week. Robert Kraft auctioned off Super Bowl 51's ring. He only got $1.25 million for it. The only guy that could have afforded that apparently was Federer, right? Who knows? Whoa. All right. Hey, we talked about sports coming back. PB, I can't believe this. If you said to me, of all the four sports, which one would have the most aggressive plan? It actually sounds like the NHL. Bettman has figured this out, apparently. He's coming back with only 24 teams. They're going to play in a tournament. The only thing that stinks about it for our Bruins, they were the number one seed with 100 points at that point in time when the season was suspended. They now have to play in between the other three top seeds to see who will be the overall number one for home ice advantage throughout the entire tournament, while the other 20 teams play against each other in a round robin. It should be interesting. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you had to come up with some shortened format, right? And I think getting right into the playoffs is the right thing to do. Not awarding the top four seeds for being there already and having to have to play to get that is a little bit of, usually you're playing in to get into the playoffs, not playing in for your seed that way. So I'm not sure I'm on board with that.
Yeah. I will say this. I like to go right in with the playoffs because the NBA, they also announced they're going to come back. They plan to start the league on 7/31 with training camp and then resume games apparently sometime in August, early September, I guess. I think that's what I'm hearing correctly. But for them, even better, they're going to be in the happiest place on earth. They're going to play all the games in Disney World with 22 teams. Not every team is coming back. So poor Steph Curry's little daughter, the media darling Riley, because Golden State is not invited to the party of 22. Riley will not be there. Tommy, is that fair? Tommy says, yes, it's fair. Golden State stunk. All right. So we'll see what happens. And baseball. You know what, PB? I don't think they're ever going to play. I really don't. These guys just don't have a clue. Who knows? All right, let's move on to the NFL because they are still on course for 2020 season by all accounts, including rumors are with some level of fans, correct?
Yeah, they know on the exact plan of the capacity for each game and how that season's going to work and all that stuff and who gets to go out of the season ticket holders and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of questions still to be answered.
And you're a season ticket holder down in Miami, so hopefully you win a lottery seat.
I know, hopefully, right? All right, so this week we're doing the AFC North. Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and Cincinnati. Looking at the Vegas odds on these teams, Baltimore is sitting at 11.5 wins right now. Pittsburgh at 9, Cleveland at 8.5, and Cincinnati at 5. That would be your 1, 2, 3, and 4 teams in the division if that were the case. while I don't have them finishing at that exact record, that's the order I do have them finishing in, starting with Baltimore. So the Ravens, the big question in Baltimore is, can Lamar Jackson repeat his performance from last year?
Sure.
Some people are saying that he can't do that just because he had such a great year. But I think they put some good things in place there to have another great season. The other thing Baltimore has going for them is do have the easiest schedule in the entire NFL this year, number 32 overall. But despite that, even though Vegas has them coming in at 11.5 wins, I have them coming in at 11 wins, 11-5. Starting off strong, though, with a 6-1 record. That would be a home win against Cleveland. Then they have to go to Houston. I have that as an early season loss for them. Coming back home and getting fired up to play the Chiefs and beating Kansas City in Baltimore. On the road against Washington, easy win. At home against Cincinnati, they should win that one handily. Then I have them winning a tough game on the road at Philly, and then I have them coming back home and beating the Steelers. So that's a nice little 6-1 start for them. Then they go on a little 2-game road trip, and they drop them both. They got to go play the Colts in Indianapolis, followed up by New England Patriots at New England. I have 2 losses there to put them at 6-3. Then they come home against Tennessee. They win that. Then they go on the road in a divisional battle against the Steelers on the road, and they drop that game. But then they come back home, and they play another tough game against Dallas, and they win that one. Then I have this as an interesting loss here towards the end of the season, going at Cleveland and dropping that game in the division, and then finishing off with a 3-game winning streak at home against Jacksonville, at home against the Giants, and then finally a road win to close out the year at Cincinnati. That would land them at 11-5.
11-5, huh? Woo! All right. Let me just tell you a couple things they did during the offseason, then I'll tell you who I think they did, how they're going to do. Key offseason moves they made. Obviously, drafting J.K. Dobbins in the second round was a steal. KC should never let him slid to the second round. They should have taken him instead of who they picked. Also, they got a stud linebacker, Patrick Queen, linebacker from LSU. He was picked number 1 at the 28th position. He'll start for those guys. And then a sleeper for them, defensive tackle Justin Madubuike, I think is how you say that. Came from Texas A&M. He's going to play a lot for them as well. May not stop, but he'll play for them. Big free agent signing was offensive lineman DJ Fluker because they lost, as you know, offensive lineman Marshall Yanda, who was a legitimate all-pro candidate every single year. They did pick up a DN and Derek Wolfe. He'll play for them as well. And those offensive young studs they got going along with Lamar, my boys from OU, Hollywood Brown, and the next Gronk, Mark Andrews, are going to be even bigger and better this year. So these guys, I think, are going to be very tough. And don't forget another OU player on the O-line, my boy Zeus, Orlando Brown. So, PB, here's what I think. I think they only lose to Indy on the road, Pittsburgh 1 game, probably on the road, and I think they do lose the Eagles game. I think they go 13-3, maybe 12-4, depending on the Titans game. But I think these guys are legitimately as good as they were last year, and I don't see any worse than 12-4.
All right. That's a good prediction. I like it. Strong team, though. Is it safe to say that they are one of the better teams, if not the best team in the NFL and AFC?
Yes.
Right up there with Kansas City, New Orleans.
You know what? If Kansas City played them in the playoffs last year, I think what you saw in the regular season would have happened again. I just don't think Kansas City's defense was strong enough to contain Lamar.
Okay. All right. Good one. All right. So moving on, we have Pittsburgh finishing second in that division. I have them hitting the Vegas under/over win total right on the nose at 9 with a 9-7 in record. They start off on the road at the Giants, and they win that, only to come back and drop their home opener against the Denver Broncos. So starting off 1-1 there. Then they play a home game against Houston. They win that. Then they go at Tennessee, and they lose that. So sitting at 2-2. Then they go on a nice little 2-game win streak at home, beating the Philadelphia Eagles and the Cleveland Browns. Then they lose at Baltimore. They lose at Dallas. And then they go on a nice 4-game winning streak at home against Cincinnati, at Jacksonville. They beat Baltimore at home, and then an easy win against Washington at home. So sitting pretty good at that point. They'd be 8-4, but then I have them losing 3 of their last 4 games. They go up to Buffalo, and they lose that one. They go into Cincinnati. They salvage that game. but then they lose to Indianapolis, and then they lose on the road to end the season at Cleveland. So I got them finishing at 9-7.
Wow. All right.
Which will contend them for a wild card.
Yep. I think they do a little better. I'll tell you why in a moment. But let's talk about some of the moves they made. First of all, Pittsburgh was lucky in the draft. They didn't get the pick to the number 49th position. They drafted a wide receiver, Chase Claypool out of Notre Dame, who a lot of people thought were going to go higher than that. And Pittsburgh, in my opinion, is the best in the league at finding studs late in the draft at wide receiver. They've been doing that historically going back to Antonio Brown, who was not widely regarded when he came out. So I think they find another stud to go along with Juju and James Washington. And don't forget, they always have a decent tight end. They signed Eric Ebron from the Colts. He's going to flourish. And the biggest offseason move of all, Big Ben is back. Just think, last year that team with Big Ben, they're a playoff team, right? They almost got there without him. So with him back, they're back as a playoff team. I'm looking forward to them being right up there again. I got to tell you, I think they're easily 10-6 and possibly 11-5. The only definite the only losses I see, road losses to Tennessee, Baltimore, Dallas, and Buffalo, and a home loss to Indy. The only other possible loss I think they have is Philly at home as well, taking them to 10-6. But I believe these guys could be 11-5.
Wow. All right. It's a bold prediction. I like it, though. Here's probably going to be the biggest roller coaster season that you'll probably see here with the Cleveland Browns. They're one of the most unpredictable teams in the NFL. Vegas has them at 8.5 wins. I have them slightly underperforming that by a game and a half and coming in at 7-9. They do, for all intents and purposes, have a pretty easy schedule. But what I have them doing is actually losing a lot of the games that they should win and winning a lot of the games that people might think they lose.
Really?
Yeah, here's how that happens.
All right, let's hear it.
They open up on the road at Baltimore. They're going to lose that. Then they come back home against Cincinnati and Washington, 2 cakewalks there to go to 2-1. Then they go on this 5-game losing streak, which will put them at 2-6 basically after 8 games. And here's what that losing streak looks like. They're at Dallas, a loss. Indianapolis at home, a loss. At Pittsburgh, a loss. Then I have them dropping one at Cincinnati. And then just when everyone's going to start getting on Baker and company, they're going to come back home. Everyone's going to expect them to turn this season around, and they're going to drop their 5th straight at home to the Las Vegas Raiders and fall to 2-6. So halfway through the season, not looking too good. But then I have them really coming out in the second half of the season, winning some big games. They'll have 2 games at home after that against Houston. They'll win that, and against Philly, and they'll win that. They'll be 2 big wins, and now people will be talking about can they make a late run and get into the playoffs. Then they go to Jacksonville on the road, and they win that. It's a little 3-game winning streak. But then they come back. No, I'm sorry. Then they are on the road again against Tennessee, and they drop that game to lose and that 3-game winning streak. Then they come back home and play Baltimore, and I got them winning against the Ravens in that game. Then I have them go to the New York Giants and losing to the Giants in New York. And then going to the Jets and losing to the Jets, New York. And then finally coming back home for the final game of the season and beating Pittsburgh. So I have them kind of all over the place. As I said, winning games they should lose, losing games they should win. A very difficult team to figure out. They're going to bring an A game on some weeks. They're going to come in and fall flat on their face on other weeks, which is why I have them at 7-9, maybe 8-8 in a best-case scenario. But they will not make the playoffs.
Wow. All right. I'll tell you what. They made some good moves in the offseason. They got Jack Conklin, offensive tackle from the Titans. That's a huge move for them. And then they drafted another offensive tackle, Jedrick Wills from Alabama. So these 2 guys are going to start. Wills is going to have to play left tackle. He's never done that before. That's a little concerning. They got an edge rusher, not to start, Adrian Claiborne. We know about his history, but he can rush the passer. So they'll bring him in situationally. That's a good pickup for them. 2 stud picks they made besides Jedrick Wills, Grant Delpit, who may have been the best safety out of LSU, and then a kid you know well from FAU, Florida Atlantic, Harrison Bryant, the tight end that we talked about is probably a possibility for the Pats, but they didn't do it. He got drafted in the 4th round. So they did some good stuff in the offseason. Hopefully Baker does not do as many progressive commercials as he did last year because he had more commercials than wins. So we'll see what happens. I think 8-8 is realistic. I think 9-7 is not out of the realm either. I definitely agree with you. They lose games. They're going to lose. I think they lose to Baltimore twice. They definitely lose to Cowboys and Pittsburgh one game. I got them losing to Houston as well. And I'm with you. I think they lose to Vegas. I think they lose to the Eagles and they lose to the Colts. So that's the games they definitely lose at 8-8. And then who knows? Another surprise loss could happen. But I think they're around that record, 8-8, 9-7.
Okay. All right.
All right. Let's conclude it with Cincinnati.
Yeah, we have Cincinnati next. Obviously, all eyes on Joe Burrow.
Joe Burrow, the next Tom Brady, they think.
And they do have, a relatively easy schedule, 6th easiest in the NFL. Vegas has them coming in at 5 in the under-over. I think that's pretty spot on. It would be a tough bet to go on either side of that. But I do have them just underperforming it slightly with a 4-12 record, finishing last in the division. But that's not to say they're not going to go out and have some pretty competitive games. And I had to pick some games for them to win here. So we'll see which ones I had there. With one of the biggest surprises will be one that you're not going to like. Okay.
Oh, okay.
You probably know who I'm talking about from one of our previous shows.
Yeah.
NFC East, right? So I have them opening up at home, losing to the Chargers, going on the road and losing to Cleveland, and then followed up by another loss on the road at Philadelphia, starting at 0-3. Then they do come back home and win their first game of the year against Jacksonville. Then they have to go on their tough 2-game road trip at Baltimore, at Indy in back-to-back weeks. They dropped both of those, sitting at 1-5 now. Come back home for a nice win against Cleveland. Then they drop the following game at home against Tennessee. Then they go to Pittsburgh and lose. Then they go to Washington. They salvage that game for their 3rd win of the year. Then they play at home against the Giants. They put up an L there. They go on the road to the Dolphins. They lose that one. Then they come home and they beat the Dallas Cowboys in a big upset, and they win that game for their 4th win of the year. And then I have them losing their last 3. Pittsburgh at home, at Houston, Baltimore at home. So ending up at 4-12. They got to win some games. I just, pick the Cowboys, one of them coming back home.
Whoa. All I say is Joe Burrow has a lot riding on this. They got rid of Andy Dalton. I thought they should have kept him around to see if Joe can perform in his rookie year. I don't know about that. We'll see. T. Higgins, a big acquisition they got as well. They got rid of 2 cornerbacks. They brought 2 in, including a former number 1 in Trey Williams. So they made some moves. I just don't see this team being strong. I think they win 3 games. Jacksonville, Cleveland, 1 game, and the game against the Giants. And here's what I tell you about the Cowboys game. Dak goes down in the first quarter. Andy Dalton comes in because he's with the Cowboys now, right?
Yeah.
Andy Dalton comes in and he beats his former teammates. And they do go 3-13 and contend for the number 1 pick once again.
All right. Well, we're not too far off there.
All right. Wrapping up this week's show, fans, we've got to give one quick acknowledgement out there. Our hearts go out to the family of George Floyd. It was a terrible, terrible thing that happened last Monday night. And I know a lot of athletes are speaking out about it. We just want to say we're thinking about it as well. Things going to get better in America. We're hoping it does going forward. PB and Z signing off. PB, next week's show will consist of who from the NFL?
We're going to go over to the NFC, and we're going to go out west. We're going to take a look at the 49ers, last year's representation of the NFC in the Super Bowl, along with the Seattle Seahawks and the Rams and the Cardinals, and we'll see what's going on out there.
Tommy's all excited. You're talking about Jimmy G, his former backup. All right, folks, we're signing off. We'll see you next week. Have a great weekend.